Hello and welcome to New Frontiers on CCTV International. I'm Ji Xiaojun in Beijing. And today in our program, we're continuing with our major series about Chinese civilization. A little more than 2,000 years ago, at the time of the Qing and Han dynasties, the Chinese nation emerged as a unified political and cultural entity for the first time in history. Well, immediately prior to this, there had been an era of enlightenment. During the Spring and Autumn and Warring States period, various schools of thought, such as Confucianism, Taoism, and Maoism flourished. Well, several centuries later, there would be another golden age. This coincided with the Wei, Qing, and Northern and Southern dynasties, an era of spectacular prosperity in philosophy and the arts. It was during this period that a number of extraordinary artists emerged, who took such art forms as calligraphy, painting, literature, and sculpting to unprecedented heights.
The second tremendous social change after the Spring and Autumn period and the Warring States period in Chinese history took place during a time when China was under the rule of the Wei and Jin dynasties and the Northern and Southern dynasties. At this time, ethnic groups in North China merged on a large scale, and much of the culture of the Central Plains was taken to the south by immigrants. For a period of 400 years after the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods, the Chinese created a rich legacy for future generations. It was an era of great advance in philosophy and the arts. In the arts in particular, there were breakthroughs in every field. This was also an era that made it possible for the emergence of many people of great talent. On the third day of the third month of the lunar year, in the year AD 353, a great event took place in the history of Chinese arts. On what was a very pleasant day with a perfectly clear sky, 41 men of letters wearing impressive hats and broad sashes sat together at Orchid Pavilion on the outskirts of Shaoxing by the Lanxi River. An exquisitely made wine cup was placed on the water in a creek so it could float downstream, and whenever the cup came to one of the 41 men, he would take it up, drink the wine in it, and compose a poem. This was a special ceremonial drinking party of a type that had been held by Chinese scholars for hundreds of years. The ceremonial part was related to the custom of presenting offerings to water, but for these 41 men of letters, this was every bit as much a spring outing. One of the scholars, 50-year-old Wang Shizhi, took up a brush pen and wrote a piece of prose about the gathering itself. The 41 scholars could never have imagined that their gathering that day would become a celebrated part of the history of Chinese art. But Wang Shizhi's preface to the Orchid Pavilion collection would go on to become known as the #1 calligraphic work in the running script style of calligraphy. The essay contains 324 Chinese characters in 28 rows, and the strokes in each of the characters are fluent and neat. There are 7 characters that mean no, and 21 characters with the particle zhi. Each one of them has its own particularity, yet overall, in this work of calligraphy, they appear completely compatible with each other overall. The period of the Wei and Jin dynasties was an era in which the art of Chinese calligraphy burgeoned and grew with great strength. The accomplishments of Wang Shizhi mark the point at which Chinese calligraphy reached maturity, as well as a peak in the history of this writing art. Wang Shizhi was born in the year AD 303 in Langya Prefecture, which is today Linyi in Shandong Province. Toward the end of the Western Jin dynasty, noble families in the Central Plain fled to areas south of the Yangtze River to avoid unending wars. And in the year AD 317, a group of these nobles established the Eastern Jin dynasty in the city of Nanjing, with Sima Rui as emperor. Despite the fact that this dynasty was to be plagued by wars, it would bring forth a multitude of outstanding men of letters, accomplished in every conceivable art. Wang Shizhi, who took the style name Yi Xiao, was from a family that was prominent during the dynasty of the Eastern Jin. His family home had been filled with works of calligraphy which he had studied and learned to appreciate when he was very young. When he was old enough, he made trips away from home to visit famous mountains and rivers around China and copied numerous calligraphic inscriptions he found on stone tablets. Eventually, he mastered the art of calligraphy to the highest level. A comment in the book History of the Jin reads, Wang Shizhi gained a great reputation when he was very young. All the court ministers appreciated his talent. The imperial court appointed him minister of the board of the civil office, but he declined the appointment. Wang Shizhi refused to take this high post not once but several times, but this was feudal China, and a person's value was judged by the official position held and the wealth accumulated. Wang Shizhi's refusal to take the conventional path made him a misfit. In his calligraphic works, Wang Shizhi expresses his unadulterated honesty. They bear no traces of vulgarity, yet fully reveal his thinking about the world. And the spiritual world seen in his works is typical of that aspired to and often attained by men of letters from noble families of the Jin dynasty.
这个时期的士人的精神面貌，首先呈现出比较独特的状态，我们一般叫做魏晋风度。魏晋风度体现在哲学上，是追问老庄哲学里面的无；在生活形态上，是追求所谓的放；在精神境界上，是寻求所谓的达。那么这一切都体现了魏晋时期士人他在精神上和自我上一种觉醒。
An important activity in the lives of scholars of the Wei Jin time was discussing impractical matters and purely philosophical theories centered on what was known as the learning of mystery, a neo-Taoist doctrine prevalent among scholars in the 3rd and 4th centuries. These discussions were rather like today's forums. Well-educated scholars would gather together in some quiet place to conduct debates on philosophical matters. After the Western Jin dynasty unified China once again, for a certain period the imperial court paid great attention to the development of production, and as part of this, taxes on the common people were greatly reduced. As a result, the country's economy and culture progressed considerably.
Now, the philosophy on which the cultural prosperity during the Wei and Jin period was based was metaphysics, otherwise known as the learning of mystery. In essence, it advocated the Taoism of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi. Taoism, in fact, was such a powerful influence on intellectuals that it all but eclipsed Confucianism, which had been the orthodox ideology throughout the Han Dynasty.
At the core of the learning of mystery was reinterpretation of the 3 great classical philosophical books Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi, and the Book of Changes. The 2 greatest Taoists, Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi, had advocated the doctrines of nature and man being one, and the oblivion of the outer and inner worlds. During the Jin dynasty, scholars found themselves greatly enlightened by these doctrines, and they passionately debated such issues as the kind of life that could bring happiness to people, whether material satisfaction or the emancipation of the soul was more important, and what constituted the state of perfect morals. They came to the conclusion that the significance of life did not lie in gain or loss at any one time or for one matter, but that it lay in the ease one felt in one's heart and the release of one's true feelings. The learning of mystery stimulated the creative power of Chinese civilization. During the Wei and Jin dynasties, the Chinese culture on the Central Plain that had remained unchanged from the previous Qin and Han dynasties underwent a complete overhaul. All aspects of the culture took on a new outlook. The thinking of every prominent scholar became permeated with ideas from the learning of mystery, and their actions testified to the elegant Wei Jin bearing. In April 1960, while excavating a tomb of the Southern Dynasties period, the Nanjing branch of the Jiangsu Provincial Cultural Relics and Archaeology team found this rubbing of a large brick carving depicting the 7 sages of the bamboo grove. The 7 sages were Ji Kang, Ruanji, Shan Tao, Xiang Xiao, Wang Rong, Liao Ling, and Ruan Xian, and they were representative of those who pursued abstract philosophy and the learning of mystery. Each of these 7 men had a particular moral standing and point of view, but they all agreed on one point, that one's life should not be restrained by dogma, and that people should live the way the earliest human beings had lived, by being self-aware, humane, and honest. In this brick carving, we can see that some of the 7 sages are stripped to the waist and some are dressed in loose shirts with wide sleeves. These scholars were passionate about discussing philosophical matters, and they paid great attention to the cultivation of high morals. Ji Kang, the leader of the 7 sages, was madly in love with music. History books tell us he was well versed in many of the arts, but that he excelled at music and often played the lute and recited poems to entertain himself. Sadly, when he was just 40 years old, Ji Kang was falsely accused and executed. But as the time of his execution approached, the only thing he was worried about was whether his great work of music, Wang Ling San, would be lost to the world. The most important achievement in Chinese literature during the Wei Jin time and the period of the Southern and Northern dynasties was the appearance of pastoral poetry. In this era, Chinese poets made great nature an independent subject. Zhuangzi said, "Heaven and earth are the most beautiful, but they don't brag about it." For the first time, Chinese scholars expounded on the detached beauty of great nature, and many of them resigned from their official posts so they could lead a reclusive life in a natural environment. The most representative of these scholars is Tao Yuanming. Tao Yuanming gained an official post at the age of 29, but after that, he experienced various ups and downs in his career. In November 405, he took up what would be his last official post, Magistrate of Pengzi County, in which he remained just 80 days. After resigning, he returned to his native village at the foot of Mount Lushan and stayed there to enjoy nature and a life that transcended the vulgar world. He spent the rest of his life in a shabby cottage writing a large number of pastoral poems, one of them, the immortal Ode to Homecoming. It reads, "My garden is overgrown with weeds. Why shouldn't I come back?" In his poems, Tao Yuanming expressed his joy at returning to the natural environment and his great love of nature. In so doing, he created a new style of pastoral poetry. He wrote, "Confined in a cage far too long, now I've returned to nature. I've forgotten material gain and am far away from the secular world. In the quietude, I appreciate the beautiful garden. There are so many things in the world I can go without." Many Chinese poets followed Tao Yuanming's example and, like him, gave expression to a state of mind that was detached from the outside world and a longing for life in a natural environment. They sang the praises of inspirational, beautiful, and everlasting nature. Poets and writers in this time did not regard enlightenment through education, material gain, or fame as the end goal for going about their literary work. Instead, they concentrated their energies on expressing their inner world and eulogizing great nature. Tao Yuanming's immortal poems had a great influence on men of letters of the generations that followed, including Li Bai, Du Fu, Bai Juyi, Su Dongpo, and Xin Qiji. A line from one of Li Bai's poems reads, "How can I behave humbly in front of big shots?" These words show that the scholarly thinking of the Wei Jin time exerted a great influence on the spiritual world of scholars in later Chinese history.
During the Wei and Jin period, Chinese intellectuals were very much preoccupied with something called awakening the inner self. And it's a concept that is exemplified by the writing of Tao Yuanming. Something else this period of history is noted for is the emergence of calligraphy. No longer employed simply for practical use, calligraphy was elevated to an object of aesthetic appreciation.
Before the Wei and Jin dynasties, the art of Chinese calligraphy had been through 4 stages of development. The first stage is marked by inscriptions on bones and tortoise shells of the Shang dynasty from around the 16th to 11th century BC. The second stage is marked by inscriptions on ancient bronze objects, and the third stage is marked by seal characters of the Qin dynasty. The fourth stage is marked by the official script of the Han dynasty. However, due to an overemphasis on standard writing, it was very difficult for calligraphers using these calligraphic styles to express their personalities. And so, during the Wei and Jin dynasties, a number of calligraphers created running script and standard script. This great reform of calligraphy enabled the hands and minds of calligraphers to be set free, and so the works of great calligraphers living in the Wei and Jin dynasties, such as Wang Shizhi, display a natural style of writing. From that time on, Chinese calligraphy was no longer just a way of writing, but a form of art that could be used to express the sentiments of the calligrapher.
可以说，在汉代以前的书法基本上都是实用的书法，而魏晋时期王羲之为代表的书法变成艺术书法，变成了一种真正的一种艺术。所以，人的觉醒、文的觉醒和书法的觉醒，代表了生命的觉醒。
The calligraphic work preface to the Orchid Pavilion collection, known as the #1 work in the running script style of calligraphy, has long been used as a model for Chinese calligraphers. The calligraphic style developed by Wang Shizhi and Wang Xianzhi has been imitated now for nearly 2,000 years, and all the calligraphic styles such as standard script, running script, and wild cursive script were developed on the basis of Wang Shizhi's style. All the great calligraphers of later times assimilated the cultural nutrients of Wang Shizhi's works. Zhang Xu, a calligrapher who lived during the Tang dynasty, meticulously copied all the calligraphic works of Wang Shizhi, and on the basis of Wang Shizhi's running script, he developed wild cursive script. Su Shi, who lived during the Song dynasty, was the founder of the calligraphic style known as Following the Mood. Su Shi worshipped Wang Shizhi and Wang Xianzhi, saying, "Their calligraphic works are superbly bright, yet plain in appearance." He regarded Wang Shizhi's calligraphic style as the ideal model. Su Shi executed his brushwork according to his mood, not according to rules, and he studied masterpieces in order to know what they were attempting to convey, not simply to appreciate the way they looked. In other words, he cared little about the rigid outer form. Su Shi is universally acclaimed as having reached a truly high level in the art of calligraphy. Only those whose cultural attainments are at the highest level can assimilate the spirit of the works of Wang Shizhi and Wang Xianzhi and not fall into vulgarity. Zhao Mengfu, a great calligrapher who lived in the Yuan dynasty, carried on the carefree and graceful calligraphic style of Wang Shizhi. Zhao Mengfu has been generally referred to as a true disciple of Wang Shizhi. There is a saying among Chinese calligraphers: calligraphy practitioners who do not follow the Jin dynasty style cannot achieve the highest level. Those who do not obey the rules of Wang Shizhi cannot enter into the essence of calligraphy. Calligraphers in the Wei and Jin dynasties developed the basic spirit and character of the art of Chinese calligraphy. Their advocacy of stressing the essence and making light of the appearance is an aesthetic criteria in the art of Chinese calligraphy. In 1980, in a tomb in Wanguo village near Taiyuan municipality in Shanxi province, Chinese archaeologists discovered many cultural relics. The tomb's occupant was Luo Rui, the prime minister of the northern Qi dynasty, and among the artifacts in his tomb were 71 magnificent wall paintings. These wall paintings show no traces of the rigid style commonly associated with the Qin and Han dynasties of more than 2,000 years ago. On the contrary, the gradations are distinct, their composition original, and the human figures depicted in them are lifelike. Moreover, the paintings vividly present scenes from real life. The eyes of the steed radiate vigor no matter the angle from which they are viewed. When drawing this lifelike horse, the painter adopted a realistic approach, using fluent lines and bright colors. It is a first-class example of Chinese traditional painting. The earliest known drawings in China are decorative patterns on colored pottery from the periods of Yang, Shao culture and Longshan culture, and on bronze objects of the Yin dynasty. But we know nothing about the individual artists who created them. No drawings made prior to the Wei and Jin dynasties bear the names of those who created them. All were executed by nameless craftsmen. Painting as a real form of art first appeared in the Wei and Jin dynasties. Learned people living in the Jin dynasty pursued individual freedom, a social endeavor that presented a fine opportunity for the development of painting as an art form. Gu Kaizhi, who lived during the Eastern Jin dynasty, discarded all the pretentious manners of traditional men of letters and took a more liberal approach to his paintings by expressing his personal feelings and ideas. He wanted to express himself on paper, not traditional maxims or dogmas. He was striving to convey a kind of spirit, not pursue a likeness and form. Lao Tzu, worshipped as the founder of Taoism, referred to natural standards, and the correct use of these natural standards as the divine way. Zhuangzi, another Taoist philosopher, called people's hearts the essence, and the correct use of the essence, the divine way. The Chinese phrase for the word spirit involves the combination of these words of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi. An ancient story tells how Gu Kaizhi drew the image of a man on a piece of paper, but did not add eyes for several years. When asked why, he said, "Whether his body looks nice or ugly isn't important. The key to drawing human figures is to reveal their inner thoughts, and in a painting, the eyes are the key to conveying the inner thoughts of a human figure." All the paintings of Gu Kaizhi available to us today are copies. The painting, The Admonition Scroll, was painted by Zhang Hua, who lived during the Jin dynasty. All the young women in the painting are unusually tall. The thin and even lines convey little sense that the subjects have weight, so much so that they were to become known as silkworms spinning out silk. The painting Ode to the Goddess in the Luo River was created according to a description in a prose poem of the same title by Cao Zhi. In the painting, Cao Zhi looks at his lover, imperial consort Mi, his eyes full of affection. His reluctance to part with her and his sadness are vividly depicted. Gu Kaizhi initiated the theory of lifelike depiction in painting, and it went on to become one of the most basic theories of Chinese traditional painting.
Taoist philosophy was manifested also in traditional painting, with its focus on lifelike depiction. In fact, it is the unique approach to expression as opposed to representation that sets traditional Chinese painting apart from Western-style painting. Incidentally, it is also what makes the art so quintessentially Chinese. Well, if you want to learn more about the golden age of Wei and Jin period arts, join me again next time. And thank you for staying with us on today's New Frontiers. I'm Ji Xiaojun from CCTV International. Goodbye.